Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission for this session is to take a pretty heavy stack of source material, specifically this fascinating 2013 philosophical essay by an author named Feng.
Right.
And we are going to extract a very radical, very specific premise from it. The idea that the human ego isn't just, a psychological quirk, but the literal root of all human pain.
Yeah, the literal root.
Exactly. And more importantly, we're going to pull out the author's actionable step-by-step guide to finding ultimate freedom.
Which is quite the promise.
It really is. But before we get to that blueprint, I want you listening to just think about the last time you felt truly stressed out.
Oh, yeah. Take a second and really picture it.
Right. Were you trying to force a project to go a certain way at work,
Well-
just like micromanaging every tiny detail?
Or maybe arguing with a partner.
Yes, trying desperately to get them to see a situation exactly from your perspective. If you take a step back and trace that stress all the way down to its absolute bedrock,
Yeah.
you usually find one thing sitting at the bottom of it all.
The desperate need to control.
The desperate need to control.
And that need to control is exactly what this 2013 essay, which is titled, "It is Ego That Blocks Our Way to Heaven," is targeting.
Heaven, in this sense, being ultimate peace.
Right. To accomplish our mission today, we have to look at how this source material weaves together concepts from, agriculture, ancient spirituality, and radical modern community living.
It covers a lot of ground.
It really does. The ultimate goal of this deep dive is to understand the actual mechanics of why the ego is so destructive and how theoretically a person can completely dismantle it.
So to give you a mental image for how this source material treats the ego, think of it like a deeply embedded virus in a computer's operating system.
Right, like that.
Right, because the virus operates entirely under the guise of protecting the system. It throws up firewalls, it hoards processing memory, it constantly alerts you to perceived external threats.
It's a survival mechanism.
Exactly. It convinces the computer, you need me to survive, the internet is dangerous, so keep your guards up. But in reality, the virus is the exact thing causing the whole machine to overheat, freeze, and eventually crash.
Wow, yeah.
The ego thinks it's keeping you safe by trying to control the world around you. But the argument here is that this virus is actually the very thing blocking you from a state of heaven.
And just like dealing with a computer virus, before we can talk about how to quarantine it or, delete it entirely, we have to look at what the healthy operating system is supposed to look like.
The baseline state.
Exactly. The author establishes this very clear dichotomy between the ego and what they call the law of nature, or the greatest creator's will.
So our uninfected state is supposed to be one of complete natural harmony.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the author uses a very specific, honestly kind of surprising analogy to illustrate this natural harmony.
The farming one.
Yeah, they point to permaculture agriculture as the ultimate model for human existence.
Which is fascinating.
It is. Because if you're not familiar, permaculture is a way of designing agricultural systems that mimic natural wild ecosystems.
Right, you don't fight the land.
No, you don't clear-cut a field, force the land into straight rows, and dump chemicals on it to make it do what you want.
You observe it.
Exactly. You see where the water naturally flows, you plant tall trees that naturally provide shade for smaller bushes, and you just create a system where everything supports everything else.
It just flows.
Yeah. The essay claims that when human life follows nature like a permaculture garden, the wind and rain come in their proper time, everything harmonizes, and people lead carefree lives.
That sounds idyllic.
It does, but I have to push back a little here. I mean, is human nature really as easy to harmonize as a well-planned garden?
That's a fair question.
When we act selfishly, are we just making a bad moral choice? Or does this text imply that we are fundamentally fighting against our own biological design?
The author strongly argues that we are fundamentally fighting our own design. Yeah, we aren't separate from biology, operating under a different set of rules. We are an extension of it.
So we're part of the garden.
Exactly. When a person operates from a place of ego, they are quite literally swimming upstream against the current of reality.
Oh, wow.
The essay asserts that harm and pain are exclusively created by the ego. The logic is highly mechanical.
How so?
Well, when you have an ego, you are bound to be selfish because the virus must protect itself.
Right.
And that selfishness inevitably brings harm to others, to the broader society, and to nature itself.
Yeah.
You disrupt the permaculture.
And when you disrupt that system, it doesn't just stop there. The disruption bounces back and hits you.
It creates a vicious cycle. The
Yeah.
harm you project outward just reflects back upon you. The ego is described starkly as a precipice and stumbling block.
So it's not a passive flaw.
No, it is an active heavyweight that will inevitably pull a person down into what the author calls a lower space of life.
Lower space of life.
Right, you plunge yourself into conflict, anxiety, and eventually destruction, all because you refuse to just flow with the water.
So it's not just that the ego makes you like a bit of a jerk at dinner parties when you try to dominate the conversation.
No, not at all.
It is a fundamental structural misalignment with the universe. And since the author establishes the ego as deeply unnatural, they don't just rely on farming metaphors.
They bring in the heavy hitters.
They really do. The text pulls in some massive historical spiritual figures to prove that fighting the ego is a universal ancient truth.
What's fascinating here is how the source material synthesizes these incredibly complex religious and philosophical traditions into one single unified directive.
It really streamlines it.
It bypasses all the complex theology and points out that the teachings of the gods universally state that abandoning the ego brings life and peace.
The essay specifically cites the Buddha, noting that freedom from ego, freedom from form, and freedom from worry is the literal key to entering the Elysium world.
Or the Pure Land. It also references the teachings of celestial beings, characterizing their wisdom as a philosophy of absolute, unresisting flow.
Just going with the current.
Exactly. The instruction is to take things exactly as they are. You associate with others based on natural, predestined relationships, and you act in accordance with nature.
I think the translated phrasing is quite poetic.
Oh, it is. Follow your own nature and be unrestrained. Follow your destiny and be carefree.
I love that concept of being totally unrestrained by artificial expectations.
Yeah, it's very freeing.
The essay then brings up the saints, stating that true saints lack the hearts of egos and instead take the hearts of the world as their own.
Which is a huge shift.
Just imagine the psychological shift there. Instead of having this tiny, guarded fortress of a heart that only cares about protecting me and mine, that virus mentality, you basically dissolve the boundary entirely.
You swap it out.
Right. You swap out your individual heart for a heart that feels for the entire world. Do joy is my joy.
That boundary dissolution is the core synthesis. Whether you are looking at early Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, or general spiritual sainthood, the source material argues the core requirement is identical. Be free from ego.
It's not about moral points.
No, it's the only functional way to enjoy the pleasures of life and enter paradise, whatever terminology your specific tradition might use for that state of ultimate peace.
But, this is a massive glaring question for you, the listener.
A huge one.
If figures like Jesus, Buddha, and Lao Tzu figured out the mechanics of this virus centuries and millennia ago, and if it's the core of basically every major spiritual tradition in human history, why is the ego still the primary stumbling block for humanity today?
That is the big question.
Why haven't we patched this out of our operating system yet?
Well, knowing the path and walking it are two very different things.
So true.
Theory is easy, but practice involves incredible friction. And this is exactly where the essay pivots from ancient theory to a modern real-world test case. It claims this radical selflessness isn't just a spiritual metaphor meant to be pondered quietly in a monastery somewhere. It is a literal blueprint that is being lived out right now.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because the text points to a specific physical community as proof of concept.
The new oasis.
Yes, it introduces the new oasis for life. Now, for context, the new oasis for life is an intentional community, originally founded in China by the author, where members live collectively.
They pool everything.
Exactly. They pool their resources, they don't hold private property, and they aim to live entirely without those traditional societal boundaries.
And the essay makes a direct, unflinching comparison based on this community.
It really does.
It states as a matter of proven fact that people living in this new oasis are more joyous, freer, and happier than those living in traditional marriages and families.
Which is a huge claim. And we should be clear that we are examining the text's internal logic here, rather than endorsing its happiness metrics as empirical universal truth.
Right, of course.
But the logic the author uses is highly specific and honestly challenging.
The essay claims that the residents of the new oasis are happier precisely because they have abandoned traditional structures, making them freer from ego and more selfless.
It's a linear formula.
Completely linear. The more you serve your ego, the less happy and free you will be. The freer you are from it, the closer you get to that permaculture state of paradise.
We really need to talk about that comparison to the traditional family, because that can be an incredibly jarring concept for a lot of people to hear.
Absolutely.
We usually think of the family unit as our ultimate sanctuary, right?
The place of unconditional love.
Exactly. But if we apply the strict logic of this text, we have to look at it differently. What if, from the perspective of this essay, the traditional family unit is actually viewed as a socially acceptable enclosure for the ego?
Let's break down the mechanics of why the author views it that way.
Well, think about the language and the structure of traditional family life. My husband, my wife, my children, my house.
There's a lot of ownership there.
There is an inherent, deeply ingrained sense of ownership. And where there is ownership, there is an immediate biological desire to control and protect what's mine, often at the direct expense of others.
It's that boundary, yeah.
Right. If there was only one spot left on the lifeboat or one spot left at the prestigious university, I am going to fight to ensure my child gets it, not yours.
Naturally.
So in the context of this essay, a traditional family structure might inadvertently breed the very selfishness and ego-driven attachment that the text warns against.
Yeah.
It becomes this localized, fortified macro-ego.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text is fundamentally challenging our most foundational structural norms.
It's carrying them down.
It suggests that our ultimate happiness is directly proportional to how much we are willing to relinquish these traditional boundaries.
Yeah.
Loving your own child is natural, but loving your child more than you love your neighbor's child is, technically, an act of ego.
Wow, that's heavy.
The new oasis for life is presented as a physical environment where those boundaries of mine and yours are deliberately dissolved, starving the ego of the ownership it needs to survive.
Okay, so let's say you're listening to this, you're driving to work or doing the dishes, and you're thinking, all right, I see the logic. The ego virus is destroying my peace. I want to get rid of it.
Right, but what's the next step?
Exactly. Maybe you aren't quite ready to pack up your entire life, abandon your family, and move to a collective commune.
Most people aren't.
The beauty of this text is that it actually provides a literal 8-step blueprint for ego-free living that theoretically scales to the individual.
And these 8 steps range from the seemingly simple to the extraordinarily demanding, and they outline exactly how to starve that virus.
Where do we start?
The first 3 steps lay the foundation. Live according to the law of nature, actively follow the teachings of the great spiritual masters, and deliberately choose to integrate yourself into the collective and into nature, rather than isolating yourself.
Okay, pretty standard. But it's step 4 where the instructions get incredibly granular.
Yeah, they do.
Text says to desire nothing but take things as they are, and the instructions are almost shockingly primal. Drink as you thirst, eat as you hunger, and sleep as you tire.
It's a call to return to basic instincts, stripping away the complex schedules and desires we layer over our physical needs.
Right.
The ego wants to drink a specialized protein shake at exactly 6:00 a.m. to achieve a specific physique to impress other people.
The virus talking.
Exactly. The law of nature says just drink water when your body signals thirst.
Simple.
But the difficulty ramps up immediately. Step 5 is perhaps the most challenging instruction in the entire essay.
Oh, this one is brutal.
Own nothing or no one until you have nothing at all.
I have to push back heavily on the sheer practical difficulty of this. I mean, eating when I'm hungry makes intuitive sense.
Right.
But literally owning no one, owning nothing. We live in a modern world defined by property rights, leases, and contracts.
Mortgages.
Exactly. How do you exist in society while owning nothing at all? It requires a level of radical detachment that goes against basically every survival instinct we are taught.
It does go against societal survival instincts because, well, society's built by the ego.
Ah.
The text argues that the moment you claim a chair or a piece of land or a person is yours, you have drawn a boundary between yourself and the rest of the universe.
And that boundary is the ego.
That boundary is the ego. Step 6 pairs directly with that necessary detachment.
What's step 6?
Neither interfere with others, nor try to control or change them. Be yourself with your original nature.
Oh, wow.
You can see how this links back to the stress of trying to control a partner or a coworker. The instruction is incredibly blunt, just stop interfering.
But then we hit step 7, and this one honestly broke my brain a little bit.
It's a tough one.
The instruction is neither analyze and judge right and wrong, nor judge others' advantages, disadvantages, and qualities.
This raises an important question. How can you, as a modern listener, possibly reconcile this step with living in a complex ethical society?
Right.
Our entire legal system, our social justice movements, our daily interactions are entirely based on analyzing and judging right from wrong.
Exactly. If I see someone doing something actively harmful on the street, my brain instantly categorizes that as wrong, and I feel a moral obligation to intervene.
Of course you do.
But the text is telling me to completely shut off that human instinct. It's asking for a suspension of judgment that feels not just impossible, but potentially dangerous.
It is asking a lot.
It's asking you to look at the world without any internal commentary or moral categorization.
The friction you were feeling there is entirely the point.
Okay.
The author would argue that human judgment of right and wrong is fundamentally flawed because it is always, without exception, filtered through the ego.
So it's biased.
Exactly. What benefits me or my group is deemed right. What harms me is deemed wrong. By abandoning that judgment, you align with the pure law of nature, where things simply are.
They just exist.
Think of it this way. Our legal system is essentially a giant macro ego trying to manage millions of micro egos.
Oh, that's a wild way to look at it.
It uses punishment and control to enforce order. The author's logic is that judgment creates a binary creates conflict, and conflict creates pain.
Right.
The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike, you know? The rain doesn't judge.
That is a staggering way to view morality.
Yeah.
And that leads right into the final step, step 8.
The climax.
It says to actively seek out those who own nothing, who have selfless consideration, and who always remain humble, looking like both saints and servants.
And why is that?
Because, the text says, it is correct to listen to them. You're supposed to find the people who have successfully navigated these impossible-sounding steps and let them guide you.
Notice the complete inversion of societal status there.
Yeah, total flip.
In the modern world, we usually seek out billionaires, successful CEOs, or loud influencers for advice on how to live and find success.
The people with the biggest egos, basically.
Exactly. This text explicitly says no. Ignore them. Find the person who owns absolutely nothing, who blends into the background, and who looks like a servant. They are the only ones holding the actual secrets to life.
So what does this all mean? When we look at this entire document, from the permaculture analogies to the radical 8-step guide, it culminates in these two beautiful, paradoxical statements at the very end of the essay.
It does. The author concludes with this. Only selflessness helps one realize their self. And only freedom from ego helps one achieve their self.
It's the ultimate paradox. You have to destroy the false, constructed, virus-infected version of yourself, the ego, in order to actually find out who you truly are underneath it all.
Exactly.
You have to lose your life to save it.
As a practical takeaway for you, the listener, you don't necessarily have to drop all your possessions, cancel your lace, and move to a utopian collective today to find immediate value in this text. You can apply the core mechanics right now. The next time you feel that sudden spike of stress, that tightness in your chest during a meeting or an argument, just pause and notice it.
That's good advice.
Ask yourself, is this my genuine nature reacting, or is this simply my desire to control a situation that I can't control?
Yeah.
Is my ego actually the root of the misery I'm feeling right now? Just observing that mechanism, seeing the virus operate in real time, is the first necessary step toward dismantling it.
That kind of hyper-awareness is incredibly powerful. But as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Something to chew on.
Exactly. Something that builds on the strict logic of this text, but takes it a step further into our modern reality.
The text firmly, without exception, instructs us to desire nothing and to entirely stop analyzing right and wrong.
Complete neutrality.
Right. It presents this state of non-interference as the ultimate necessary goal for human happiness and peace.
But imagine, just for a moment, if humanity actually achieved this.
Okay.
What if tomorrow, all 8 billion people woke up in a pure, ego-free state? We desired absolutely nothing, we owned nothing, and we completely refused to judge right from wrong. What would happen to human progress?
That is a fascinating point. Without the drive to achieve, without the burning desire to cure diseases, invent new technologies, or build safer infrastructure, would human advancement simply halt?
And what about the concept of social justice? Fighting for civil rights inherently requires judging that a current system is wrong and desiring a right outcome. It
Absolutely.
requires looking at the world, being dissatisfied, and taking a firm stand. If we all suspended judgment entirely and just took things exactly as they are, would we just passively accept systemic injustice as part of the law of nature?
It forces us to ask a very uncomfortable question. Is a little bit of ego, a little bit of selfish desire and moral judgment actually necessary to build a better, more equitable world?
Or
Yeah.
is that very question, that exact fear of losing our progress,
Yeah.
just the ego throwing up a firewall trying to justify its own survival?
We will leave you to explore that one on your own.